Our next guest has been on the show before, but it's been a while, and well, it's been about a year because he was on with his first book, and he's with Black Odyssey Media. And his first book, Outraged, he was on the show to talk about that. And he's got a brand new book out today. Today is the release day. And the book is called Shadows of Justice. So you have the book in your hand and it's available wherever books are sold. And we welcome back Brian Copeland to Black Ops Matter TV.
Well, thanks for having me. I had such a good time last year when we got to talk about it once a year. I guess
We try to have people on when they have a new release.
No, I don't.
Because our audience is looking for the next new thing.
Of course.
But congratulations on the second installment.
Thank you.
And now, is this going to be a continuing series, or
yeah.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Oh, yeah, that was always the plan from the very beginning. The way that I designed it, it's gonna. If God is with me and readers are with me, I'd like to do one a year for the rest of my life. That was always my plan.
Well, some really good series just go on and on and on. If they have a compelling main character that has a lifespan that the writer can really extend by having some good plots and good storylines, then they're good. The longest one, and I can't remember the author's name now, so I shouldn't even mention it. But I read one mystery, and it was a mystery. It was 10 books, and I read all 10. But I can't call his name.
Oh, there are series that go way beyond that. I mean, Jonathan Kellerman, who was kind enough to blurb this book, has been writing Alex Delaware novels since 1982. Sue Grafton, who did A's for Alibi and made it all the way up to Y before she passed. She didn't get to Z, died right after Y. She wrote Kinsey Millhone for 40 years. Earl Stanley Gardner, who wrote the Perry Mason books. I think he did something like 80 or 90 of those, from like the 30s until he died in like 1970 or something. So there are
they're out there.
Oh, Walter Mosley, has been writing Easy Rollins for, 30 years, 40 years, something like that.
Yeah, well, I haven't read those other books. So I never read Sue Grafton. I see him, but I know in the alphabet books, that's what I call them. And I guess that's what everybody else calls them, but I haven't read it. I've in the last 10 years or so, there have been so many Black authors releasing books that probably 80-90% of the books I read are about Black authors. And if I had to pick an author non-Black author whose books I have read the most of in the last 20 years or so, it would be John Grisham. I've read, but he doesn't do series. I don't know if
I think his are all standalones.
They're standalones.
One or two, I think I read of his, but he only does the standalones. But from what I understand, I've been told by a couple of people in the industry that that's what they're looking for. Just
oh, they are.
And I planned on this literally before I wrote the first one, I planned on this and studied this and decided I was going to do this 20 to 25 years before I wrote the first book.
Wow. Yeah. That's a long-term plan.
Yeah. Well, what the deal was is I had back in 2000, I was going through a life change. I had been doing stand-up comedy for 22 years at that point. I was opening for Smokey Robinson and Ray Charles and Aretha Franklin and Natalie Cole and Dionne Warwick and the Temptations, Earth, Wind and Fire, all these folks touring. And I was also working in Bay Area television. I hosted the Fox Morning Show for 5 years, and I hosted an afternoon show for ABC for a couple of years. And so then in 2000, I was in kind of a transition mode where I had left the Fox Morning Show. I was going through a divorce and a custody fight. And I was trying to figure out, okay, so what do I want to do with the rest of my the rest of my career. What do I want to do? I've been doing stand up for 22 years, and I've gone probably about as far as I can go, ride that horse. And so I was staying at this place in San Diego, this kind of retreat place where you walk around and eat raw vegetables and ponder. And I decided, okay, there are three things that I want to do before what was I, 30, 36 at the time? So, before I go and meet my maker. One is I want to do a one-man stage show that's not just stand-up. I want to be able to do comedy in it and be able to do serious and dramatic stuff. Second thing is I want to partner a major motion picture. Third thing is I want to write crime fiction. And what I figured was that when I got done with everything else, when I could no longer perform on stage, I was too old or just decided I don't want to do it anymore, I could always sit at a desk and write. I've been writing since I was 12 years old when I got my first newspaper column, the local weekly throwaway. I got 200 words a week. I was 12 years old. So I figured,
Well, good
that
for
was
you. What?
I,
Where was this? Where was the? What city was that in?
when I was writing at San Leandro, California, where I live right now, or still same place. I'm still in
Oh,
my
okay,
hometown, right next door to Oakland, right next door to Oakland. So,
okay.
so the plan was is that in the meantime, since that was going to be down the line, like when I'm ready to retire, kind of a thing, the plan was, while I'm working on the other two things, the one man show and figuring out how to get in a movie, I'm going to study. I'm going to learn everything I can possibly learn about writing crime fiction, and I will have years, to do that. So across the street from the place I was staying was a little strip mall. I think it was a Borders. I think I went to in there, and I picked up two books. I picked up Stephen King's On Writing, which is the best book on writing I have ever read. I've read it like 5 times, and I picked up A is for Alibi. So I got to. I was reading everybody, as many people as I could possibly read, and I thought, gosh, I wish I could talk to some of these people and these writers and figure out how they do what they do. Then I realized, idiot, you got a radio show. And at the time, I had a radio show on the ABC affiliate San Francisco, and I did that for 27 years. I was weekly, and then I went daily with it. And I figured, what if I invite authors? What if I do what you do? What if I invite
Okay.
authors on, and they'll come on because they want to promote their books, and then during the commercials, I'll pick their brains and find out how it is they do what they do. So that's how I learned. I learned from all
Wow.
these great people I would have on radio with me. Then during the commercials, I would ask them questions. Just and they didn't realize I was picking their brain. Most of them. Some ended up being friends, later on. And in the meantime, I wrote the one man show. It was supposed to go for 6 weeks called Not a Genuine Black Man. And that ended up being my first book about growing up here in San Leandro in the 70s when San Leandro was 99.9% white and us. And what it
Yeah,
was
just your family.
my family, and what it was like to grow up in that environment. So this play
Now,
was supposed
how did you get to that town or small city? Was your
to,
dad in the military?
no. Well, yes, that's another story.
Okay.
That's another. So we moved around. He was in the service, but that's not why we ended up here. I was born in Akron, and when he was in the service, we moved around a little bit. We got here to the Bay Area when I was 6, and to San Leandro when I was 8. And the reason we got in this, as I said, there's a million stories. As far as I can tell, my mother passed when I was 14, and Grandma raised us. And
Okay.
my mother was very, very sedity. Yes, that's the only word I can think of to use. My mother
Yeah,
was
that's an
very,
old word, but I know exactly what
you know
it
exactly what I
means.
mean. She
Well,
was, she
it's
was
like bougie, but old school.
exactly, exactly. That's a great way to describe it. Yes, exactly. And so I think that's why she ended up here, not knowing how racist this place was. So this play I wrote about, about what it was like and what it did to me, as a kid and how it affected me as an adult, was supposed to run for 6 weeks in San Francisco. And I figured, okay, then I'll be on something else, and I can scratch that off my list. And instead, it ended up becoming the longest running one man show in Bay Area theatrical history. Ran 7 years, went off Broadway, 30 American cities. Rob Reiner is developing it right now. We're working on it for television to develop it for TV. And in the meantime, an agent friend of mine calls me up and says, I think that story would make a good book. So I go, really? Yeah. So I wrote, I took the play and I did a novelization of it, and it ended up being a bestseller here in the Bay Area, and it's being used to this day. It came out in 2006. It's used as in a lot of schools and mainly college classes across the
Mhm.
country. Now,
Kind
since
of a
they've been
teaching
banning books,
tool.
yeah, it's a teaching tool.
Hmm.
Since they've been banning books, who knows where it is? But I know that it is being used places because I go to textbook sites every once in a while to check and see, and it's there. But that was my first book, was a nonfiction book. It was a complete and total accident. To complete and total accident.
Well, books can be that way. I'm a writer too, so that a lot of times what you end up writing about isn't necessarily what you thought you were going to write about.
Exactly.
This is just something happens that should trigger you to pull the trigger on whatever the project was, whatever the concept was, or it's like that when you write. Now, when you the concept that you talk about, not a genuine black man, was it like the 70s? Was that
The
when that was going on?
story jumps back and forth.
Okay.
It starts when I'm 8 years old in 1972, and what it is it's like 30 characters. I play all the characters to tell the story. It's a 2 hour show, stage show,
Oh,
um,
okay.
and we just I've since done another six one man shows that I continue to perform, and I bring genuine out on special occasions now. You know, up to that long first run, like I'm going to do it for Juneteenth. I'll do a Juneteenth show.
Oh, okay.
But it was the 70s when we first moved here, and the early 2000s when all of the stuff that I went through as a kid, you know, all of the racism and adults driving on the street yelling the N word at me, and all of this kind of stuff that led me at some point to be I was too black for the white people, and then because of where I grew up, I was too white for black people,
Okay.
and that led to basically what was described as PTSD. I was diagnosed with from all those experiences. And where the
Wow.
title came from was the title came from a radio listener of mine who sent me an unsigned letter. I still to this date I have no idea who sent it, but it changed my life. And the letter said, "As an African American, I'm disgusted every time I hear your voice because you are not a genuine black man." And I thought, bingo, I've been looking for an idea for what to write a story about, and this is the story I'm going to tell. So it was a fluke, a complete fluke and accident.
Well, yes, so some hate mail turned into the title for a book
Yeah,
show
yeah,
or a show.
basically. Thousand
Yeah.
we last year we had the 1,000th performance of that show. The
Oh,
1,000th
wow.
performance of that show. Yeah.
You know, that still is not a resolved issue.
No, it isn't.
It comes up, um, you know, I people I tell people, even doing this show and what I do with the National Black Book Festival, um, I tell people I get it on both sides. I get comments on our page. So we have a huge social media audience for our page, 100,000 people.
Wow.
Um, a couple of times a week, I'll get a comment on one of the posts from a white person that says this is racist. The idea. But then on the other hand, I'll get varying types of comments from black people that it's not radical enough
Mm-hmm.
or you know whatever. But that's why on this show, um, I stay totally away from politics because that's being talked about everywhere, but literature isn't. So I try to keep the show about books, whatever the books that people are writing, because that information needs to get out there.
Now, see, the
And
books that I'm doing are they're mystery thrillers, but they're social commentary.
yeah, oh,
They're,
and that's great.
they're all about
That's great.
something, you
Yeah,
know.
that's
I
great
mean,
because I, you can't, when you're writing contemporary, you can't remove it. It can't be divorced from the zeitgeist, so to speak, the times, the culture, the but I mean just going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth about politics. I don't talk about it on the show because that's being talked about everywhere else. All day long, 24/7. You can hear that various places, all kinds of places, but you can't find out about the latest books that are being released on all types, fiction and nonfiction.
Well, even I told you I would have when I had my ABC show, I would have authors on, and I would get pushback from management almost all the time that I was having too many authors on. Well, people who want to read books are reading books. They're not listening to the radio. Well, now no one's listening to the radio, but but at the time, it was like, oh God, you got another author on. Say, just leave me alone and let me do what I do. My ratings are good. If the ratings go down, I'm not putting authors on, then we can have a conversation. Otherwise, just leave me alone. Just leave me alone.
Really,
Oh
it's
yeah.
interesting.
And then when they started to get really paranoid about what was happening with radio audiences dwindling for terrestrial radio, which they are. When you and I were growing up, we heard new music on the radio.
Right.
Now my kids, I don't even know where my son's a musician. I don't know where the heck he gets his music. I think they get it off of YouTube or something.
Yeah, I
Um,
don't know either.
but
I have a daughter this 20 should be 29 next month. I don't know where she finds out about songs. Well, and the music that I like is the music that I grew up with
mhm.
in my teen, my formative years and my 20s and even 30s. It kind of went like, to me, it
See, that's
it
a sign
I,
of age.
it
Me
just
too.
didn't have it doesn't it's not the same. I listen to Pandora, so I'll
Oh, okay.
have different stations with different themes, kind of, and I have one station that really I've been listening to lately. It's based on Mysterious Vibes. Do you remember the song Mysterious Vibes by the Blackbirds? I think it was.
I'm not the top of my head. Sing a few bars.
You know the song. It was men singing it, so it's hard for me to sing as deep as they were. Mysterious vibes that we
Oh,
share.
oh, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay,
See,
yeah.
I knew you would know it.
Okay, yeah. Okay, okay.
It plays the best music. I mean, it's just brings in all kinds of stuff. Eddie Kendricks, some of the early Isley Brothers stuff, like I mean, just the BT Express, Ohio players, even the older Ohio players that were Funky Worm and Ecstasy. So, but just the music is just amazing, and they had bands, and the people could actually sing, and so
Yep.
I love it. I
See,
love
but see, when we say that, we sound old.
it. We do, but it's
Yeah, but
real
it's real
music.
music. Here's how ancient I felt. I was having dinner with my daughter, Easter dinner with my daughter, my son-in-law, and my youngest son, the one who's a musician. He does a fusion of like rap and rock together. And I
Okay.
was explaining to them tell me if you did this, being a kid, listening to the radio with the microphone of a cassette recorder next to it,
Yes.
wait for your
Yes.
favorite song to come on, wait for it
Yes.
to
So
turn
you can
on.
hit it.
You hit it as soon as the DJ would just shut up and
Yes.
let yeah.
Because sometimes they would, and that was how you got recordings, because you didn't have the money to buy all the records.
Yeah, no, you didn't.
So that was, and the station that we had, I grew up in Newport News, Virginia. The black station, after about 8 o'clock, the power would be less and it
Yeah.
would be staticky.
Mhm.
it
So it was a low watt station. You could get it
was,
for the day, but
yeah.
at
So,
night,
but
at night
that was how we recorded music, because we would get the 45s,
yep.
but because we had a record store, as a black man that owned a record store like a few blocks from our house, so we would walk to the record store and get the latest thing. Um, just
Yeah. You were talking about the era of music you were talking about. Maybe think I hardly never think about this. I have a an uncle who I didn't know very well, a great uncle really, who was a and actually my dad sang with him sometimes too. Remember Ruby and the Romantics? Our Day Will Come. Our Day
Yes, but I
Will
didn't know
Come.
who sang it.
Yeah, Ruby and the Romantics from Akron. And
Oh,
and I had
okay.
my uncle was one of the romantics, and my father used to sing with them on street corners in Akron. So I'm told before I was born. So I'm told.
Oh, because see, I thought there was somebody like Martha Reeves or um somebody like that sang that. But I believe you.
Yeah, no
That's who I
problem.
would have guessed. I would have guessed it was. So anyway, it's been, it was like reminiscing on the times when you told me about you all being the only black family.
Hmm.
It reminded, even though my situation was a little bit different, we moved into a Jewish neighborhood. My dad was a pastor, and the church bought church parsonage in the nicest part of town, which was a Jewish neighborhood.
Hmm.
And we were the first black family that moved into the neighborhood. So I understand exactly what you're talking about. Um, the way our house was, it was on a corner, and our driveway was circular, and you could enter it from either side, either street. And on Saturday, when the Jewish people in the neighborhood would walk to the synagogue, they would walk through our driveway as if it was a street, as if it was, yeah, they
A
would
public
just,
sidewalk.
yeah, they would just walk and not say, excuse us. Yeah, I mean, they just acted like it was, and they
Public
would peep
property.
out their windows at us. They wouldn't speak. They would just, but within 5 years, that neighborhood was all black. Black
That's how it
professional
works.
people moved in. The real estate people turned it over, and it was occupied by teachers and doctors and lawyers, and it's all black middle class neighborhood. Within 5 years, it's
Well,
totally
that's
split.
because of white flight. And I
Yeah.
talk a lot in Not a Genuine Black Man. I talk in the book. I'm able to go into a lot more detail than in the show. And I researched the history of redlining and of white flight. And San Leandro, where I live, for example, was where Oakland had a healthy black population for years and years and years, and still to this day does. And you had a lot of African Americans who moved during the Great Migration during World War II, the second Great Migration, they moved to the Bay Area to work on the shipyards. Then the war
Okay.
was over, and they'd say, "Well, I'm not going to go back to Mississippi. What do I want to do that for?" So there ended up being a white flight of people white people who had homes in Oakland running to San Leandro because San Leandro had race covenants and realtors would not show you a home if you were black. They would not show you a home in the city. So
Okay.
yeah, it was a pretty eye-opening thing because when people think about that kind of stuff, they think about if it was if my story took place in Mississippi or Alabama in the 60s and 70s, people would go, "And your point is what?" You know, and but
Yeah.
not San Francisco. They
Well,
don't think
or California,
or
period.
California. You know,
Mhm.
so so that's why with the books that I do, the books that I'm doing now, the fiction books, when I finally got around to writing, I started this series about 10 years earlier than I figured I was going to start it. And it's only because of the pandemic. Because I had a run set up of my latest one man play, was supposed to open in April of 2020. Then we had the shutdown and there was nothing, and I was going
Right.
out of my head. You can only watch so much Netflix. So I thought, why
Right.
don't I write this book I've been thinking about, for 20 years, because I knew from my preparation, I knew who my characters were going to be. I knew what my setting was going to be. I knew that I wanted them to be social commentary. That, you have the mystery and the thriller part, and that's because people want to be entertained. But,
Mhm.
but also, I have a message I can slip in. And like the first book, Outraged, that I was here to talk about last time, is about the shooting of somebody's killing cops who have shot unarmed people of color and not been held accountable for it. That's the plot of it. And my
Mhm.
detective is Topher Davis, who is a African American broadcast journalist in San Francisco.
So is
And
he you? Are you him?
No, but I picked that because I know that world. See,
Okay.
I spent so much time in Bay Area broadcasting and TV and radio. I know that world. I spent 27 years in that world. So I
Okay.
know how it works. I know what people say when the doors are closed, that kind of stuff. And his sister, Lynn Sloan, who is an SFPD homicide. San Francisco is about 20 minutes from me, from where it is that I live. And I put him and his sister over in Castro Valley, which is the next suburb over. So it all takes place in the East Bay and around San Francisco and all around the Bay Area. And she's a former Navy, former Army Ranger. And I figured when I was studying these books that every one of these detectives has a buddy who is, quite frankly, I don't know if I can say the A word here or not, but a bad, you know, who, can go to a bar and beat up 10 guys. I thought, you know what? I've never seen a woman do that. I've never seen a book where that's a woman. So I made his sister, she's the one who can fight. He can't fight. Topher can't fight. He can't shoot. But there's a couple of messages in it. One of them is, one of the themes, of course, is the main theme, of course, about the shooting of unarmed people of color. But the other theme is, is just what it's like to be a black man in America, and why his name is Topher. When he was born Christopher Davis, and I read an article that when people who are white people and in charge of hiring are looking at job applications, if there is a name on the job application that looks the least bit ethnic in any way, it's an unconscious bias, from what the articles I read said. It's an unconscious bias in most situations. They disregard them more so than those where they look at it and they think it sounds like a white person or they can't tell. So Christopher Davis, when he was trying to get into broadcasting and get an internship, kept getting turned down. But he thought, okay, there's all these white boys named calling themselves Topher. I'll put that on it. Put that on my application. And then he started getting callbacks. So
Oh,
that's the kind of stuff that I slip in.
now,
The
when I
second,
saw that because I read Outraged and enjoyed it very much.
oh, thank you very much.
Of course, it's been like 20 books or 30 books back. No, more than that. More like 40 books. But I just remember I really liked it. And I remember Topher was an odd name.
Mm-hmm.
And I had never seen it before.
Oh yeah, God, there's when I was trying to come up with a name, there was a period of time when there were all these white boy actors, Topher Grace, and it like three or four of them. And I
Oh,
thought that
okay.
sounds like the whitest white boy name. That's why I thought of what sounds like a white boy name that you couldn't
Well,
tell.
Hunter is very white.
Hunter is, yeah. I can use
I've
that.
never I've never met a black hunter. Although I'm sure they're out there somewhere,
Yeah, I haven't either.
but
I
I've
haven't,
never met one. That's a very white name.
and I've certainly never met a Topher. And his sister calls him Chris. His sister calls him Chris.
Yes.
So she goes,
Hmm.
oh, but everybody else does. So the second book, Shadows of Justice, that I'm going to hold up.
Yes, the brand new
This is
one.
so pretty.
I
It's so,
have to get my copy of that. My to be read shelf because of this show. My to be read bookcases are vast, and I'm into book clubs, and so I I won't say I've started to be a collector, um, just because there's so many books. I really feel blessed. There are so many good books
yeah,
that are being released by Black authors that it's really great to have so many choices.
yeah, it really is.
Mhm.
It really is, and I
Mhm.
hope that the circumstances don't change between consolidation and the economy and people not having money to spend on extras.
Yeah,
To
because buying books is disposable income. Unless my disposable income always went to books and music. But once music changed, I don't buy music anymore, but I
nobody
used
does.
to. Yeah.
Nobody does.
Pandora, I pay for the commercial free Pandora. So somebody gets a penny or two from the songs I listen to on there. But
I do
that's
Spotify. Same thing. Exact same thing.
yeah, my daughter uses that. I like Pandora because I like being surprised when I pick a channel to listen to, it brings in something. Sometimes it'll bring in songs I haven't heard for decades.
Right.
And I like being surprised.
It's like if you like this, then you'll like this. That's how
Yes.
the algorithm works.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It played that same Mysterious Vibes channel that I have played. The Stylistics, Hurry Up This Way Again. Do you remember that song?
Yeah.
I hadn't heard that song in since I was in like high school, and it came on. It came on one day, and I did you know when you once you do a thumbs up, it'll come on more. But it'll bring in something randomly that I hadn't heard in a long time. It's like great song. I'm like, oh my god, I haven't heard this song, and so there was so much
And you
good
go back
music in
there.
that era. Huh?
You go back there. I
You
wrote that
do.
outraged that music is a time machine because
It
every
is.
time I hear a certain song, I remember exactly where I was when I first heard it.
Yes.
You know, when I was in high
Yes.
school, it was all about Michael Jackson's Thriller. When I was in high school,
Okay.
so when I hear Beat It or The Girl Is Mine or that
Thriller was an
automatically
amazing album.
it was it
It was
absolutely.
amazing. I mean, and it was so different from anything he had done before.
Well, he'd had one solo album before that was actually pretty good. Off the wall. Remember Off the Wall?
Yeah, yes, but Thriller was more.
Theatrical.
It had more of a rock element to it too.
Hmm.
Whereas Off the Wall is more pop. You
Yeah,
know what I mean?
yeah,
It
yeah.
he went rock and Thriller, and Beat It. That was.
That was Eddie Van Halen on the guitar and Beat
Oh,
It in that guitar solo.
oh,
You
okay.
didn't know
See,
that?
I never
Yeah,
knew that. I never
yeah.
knew that.
That's Eddie Van Halen. Yeah,
Okay, that's why it was rock. I mean, but when
yeah.
I was at a friend of mine's apartment and they played it, and I was like, that's Michael Jackson because it started with Beat It, and I was like, what? Because it was so different from the things he had done in the past.
Than before.
Mhm.
It was not the Motown sound. It definitely was
No, it wasn't.
not the
Yeah,
Motown.
that was bubble gun. It became kind of repetitious,
Yeah.
but
So,
they had their run for sure.
so the new book that I mentioned before, when publisher gets really mad at me. Me swinging down memory lane with music, and you were forgetting. Oh, we're doing the
Because
show, aren't
we do that on this show. I mean,
we?
that's when we talk to our guests, it's a conversation. Like
Yes.
we're at their on the couch at their house just talking.
I'm
And then we
sorry, I didn't
talk
play
about their book too,
that.
but we talk about it anything. So give us the just the bullet points about the book and
Okay.
then talk about one of the arcs in the book. Like
What are the
because
what?
you had arcs. You had really good, okay, in the book, the arc is the point where the reader says, oh my good, oh my God, it's one of those oh my God moments. And normally a book needs to have
Oh
three or
yeah,
four of those.
but I don't.
So,
It's not good to do that with this because there's spoilers.
no,
For me,
I said one. I said one. You
you
could do
know.
one, you don't have to give all the details.
Well, let me tell you what it's about. What Shadow of Justice is about. Remember, I told you every book I write, it's social commentary. Um, this book is about a suburban housewife in Pleasanton, California, which is an upscale, primarily 98% white community, about 25 miles south of San Francisco. And she, comes from a well-off family, and she's pregnant. And she and her husband are having their annual Fourth of July barbecue, and she goes to pick up her 4-year-old daughter's playmate, and disappears, and the world goes crazy. It turns into, I don't remember if you remember the Lacey Peterson case,
Mhm.
or more recently the Gabby Petito case.
Yes,
The
yes.
world
They
goes,
made a Netflix movie about that
yeah,
or
yeah.
Hulu, one of
No,
them.
no, it was a Netflix documentary. I just saw it.
Okay.
But the world goes absolutely crazy, and Topher does not want to cover another missing white girl story, but he's got to because everyone is there. Good Morning America's there, and there are new journalists from New Zealand, and in front of the house is like what was Camp OJ what they called the journalists that covered OJ. So he's walking back to the van after covering a press conference in front of the house of the woman, and this African American woman. This could be one of those moments you're talking about. This African American woman, middle aged, walks up to him and says, my name is Josie Walker, and I live in East Oakland, which is primarily black, lower to lower middle class black, and my daughter has been missing longer than this girl has, and I can't get the police to do anything, and I can't get the media to give me any coverage, and I wanted to know, will you help me? So he ends up covering both stories simultaneously. He tries to get Josie Walker's daughter Danica, who just disappeared coming home from her. She's a student at San Francisco State in pre-law, and she's working as a receptionist at a law firm, and she just disappears one day after work. So what this is about is the difference in how coverage and police attention are how they differentiate between when it's a white woman who goes missing and when it's a woman of color. And this is a story, I didn't know I was going to write this as a mystery story, but it's a story I thought about for years because I was on the radio during the Laci Peterson case. And I remember that, again, that story was everywhere. And there are a couple of reasons why, but the biggest one was that she disappeared during Christmas week, that week between Christmas and she disappeared Christmas Eve. And there's no news. But there's a 24-hour news cycle. So they got to fill it with something. And that's why that story got so crazy, because of the fact it was Christmas week. There's nothing else. That's why I said this story, it's 4th of July week when she disappears. So,
Okay.
I remember I was on the radio when I was prepping for my show. I was reading an article that the Chronicle did after the story had gone on for a while. San Francisco Chronicle had done, where they audited their own coverage to see how many stories they'd done about Laci Peterson, because it was just starting to come out that there was a woman of color, a Latina woman, who worked in what was a maid in one of the hotels in the city in San Francisco, and she disappeared around the same time. And Laci Peterson's body, her torso she's pregnant. Her torso was found in San Francisco Bay. This woman, her name was Evelyn Hernandez, pregnant, body found, torso found in San Francisco Bay around the same time. And
Mm.
so the Chronicle audited their coverage to see how many Laci Peterson stories have we done, and they've done over 2,000. They've done
Wow.
over 2,000. Then I said, okay, how many stories have we done about Evelyn Hernandez? That was a woman's name. Two. Two. and
Wow.
and the fact that the circumstances were so, and the
So
police
similar.
department to this day, they blow it off if you bring up Evelyn Hernandez. Oh, that we know what, it was her boyfriend that did it. Well, then why didn't you arrest him and put him in jail if you're so sure? It's so dismissive. I thought about that story ever since, about we've seen a million of those kind of cases since Laci Peterson. And I just thought about, how I wanted to get into it, and I wanted to address it and hit it head on in terms of, why it's like this. And one of the first things that I learned when I was doing some research, was I wondered how many African American women go missing in this country every year. Take a guess.
I know it's thousands, so I'm gonna say 3,000.
You gonna say 3,000? My guess was about 300. In
Okay.
Okay, according to the Black and Missing Foundation,
Okay, so what's
in
the number?
in 2023, which was the most recent number statistics at the time I was writing this, in 2023, over 280,000,
What?
according to the Black and Missing Foundation, over 280,000 women of color went missing in 2023 in this country. And I dedicate the book. What's the exact number? It's
What?
280,031 and 31.
So do they tell you how many end up getting found, or they just say who the
This is
missing persons?
this is how many were missing. This is how many disappeared. and
Okay.
and they go
Wow.
into the reasons why. These cases are rarely taken seriously, and the difference is that, the authorities and the news, business journalists, and remember I told you, being,
You told me that when
being
you
one of
were
the
on
only people,
before,
being
that
one of
they're white males with daughters who are
yeah,
young in their
it's
20s or whatever.
What the deal is yeah, it's the news directors who decide what's covered, and most of them are middle-aged white men.
Mm-hmm.
And when they see Gabby Petito or Lacey Peterson, they see their daughter who's her age. But
Mm-hmm.
when they see, a 17-year-old African American girl who's got dreadlocks, this doesn't, it doesn't
It
resonate
doesn't
with them
resonate
in the
with them.
same in the same way. So so that's if nothing else, that's the biggest argument for diversity in newsrooms. Right there, the fact that this and God love Gabby Petito's family because they recognize how the coverage that she got for that story, how is completely out of proportion it was to what happens to women of color who go missing. And they have started a foundation to bring attention to not just missing people, but actually an emphasis on women of color who go missing. I didn't know that
Mm.
until I saw that documentary you mentioned earlier that's on Netflix right now. But that's one of the ways they're honoring her is by making sure that black women who go missing get coverage too. But
Wow, that number that you gave me is really
it blows,
mind-boggling.
isn't it? And among the reasons that that website Black and Missing Foundation gives for the dismissal of these cases is that um, most of these people come from African American neighborhoods, and these kinds of things happen there. It's much more dangerous there than if you live in an upscale white suburb someplace. Women just don't go missing. Whereas, the stories that they tell are that I've read about cases like this are somebody will go to the police and say, "My daughter's missing. She's been missing for 3 days. Oh, she probably ran away. Ah, she's probably on drugs somewhere. She'll show. She's shacked up with a boyfriend somewhere. She'll show up." I mean, that's
Wow.
how they dismiss this. But when it happens in a suburb, and it's a suburb that is primarily white and middle class to upper middle class, these things don't happen there. So if she's an hour late coming home from her job, it's time to call the police. There's none of this waiting 3 days or 48 hours stuff. And so I wanted to say something about that. And I do.
Okay.
And look, all the mysteries there, and the case is interesting, and you're going to have your roller coaster ride, and you're
Okay.
going to get it
The
around that,
arcs. Okay.
but I slip it in. I slip it in.
Well, um, it's important to, like I say, if it's contemporary, it's important for it to be real. Unless some people write like fantasy more on a like romance, fantastical, more along those lines. But when you're doing mysteries or crime fiction, then
Wait, hey,
that's
stop,
more
stop,
real
stop, stop
life.
for a second. Stop for a second.
Okay.
When you said
Okay.
romance and fantasy,
Yeah, well, no,
no,
I mean
being
something that
romantic is fan. No, I know. I'm kidding.
no, something that's fantastical. Like
Romance.
and well, romance or fantasy, but in romances they don't really get into. And I don't read romances, but what I'm told, I've read maybe three. I need more depth when I read a
Mhm.
book. Um, but some people, it's a huge industry
Oh, it's huge.
that
This genre.
produces thousands and thousands and thousands of titles, and there's a formula, and that's what the readers want is that
Mhm.
formula. See, to me, the formulaic aspect of it makes it too predictable, and I don't want to know the plot of a book before I read
Well,
it.
it's romance. It's been since the beginning of time. Romance has always been boy meets girl, boy gets girl, boy
Mhm.
loses girl, boy gets
Yes,
girl back. Yeah,
yes, that's the storyline.
yeah.
So I, I want something that's going to uh, pull at my emotions, make me think. I just finished recently reading a book called I think Mr. Johnny. Is it Mr. Johnny from Around the Way? Mr. Jimmy from Around the Way. That's what it is. Mr. Jimmy from Around the Way by Jeffrey Blunt, um, who was a director for years, direct news director at
Really?
CBS. Mm-hmm.
Where?
At CBS,
No, no. I mean, where? Do you know where?
the national
Oh,
network. I don't
okay,
know.
the national. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was like I
And
worked for ABC in San Francisco. That's why I wondered if it was like at
oh
CBS in
no,
Chicago
he
or in
he said
Philadelphia or.
he directed like uh the presidential debate with
Okay.
President George H.W. Bush, the
So he was
senior.
working for the network then.
Yes, he worked for the
Okay.
network. But Mr. Jimmy from Around the Way, it was really, really a good book.
Okay.
So, I mean, and well written, just the characters. They went to a, I don't, and he was on the show. So the town where this black billionaire ends up is called Ham, Mississippi. But he brings in characters, the abject poverty that goes on in this little town in Mississippi.
Mhm.
He really brings that to the fore through these characters and him moving there to like get away from his circumstances. So anyway, um, your book, I like a book that makes me really
Think.
like the characters have depth and your book was like that, Outrage. So I look forward to
Thank you.
reading the new one. And I'm not just saying that because you're on, because I don't say that. I wouldn't say anything at all if I didn't believe that. I would just say it was good. But your book was really good. I enjoyed it.
Thank
And
you.
then I was in New Orleans, I think, when I read it. Then I gave it to Rhonda um, because she was looking for something to read. And we were together in New York for the Harlem Book Fair last year. And I had finished it, so I gave it to her while we were in New York. So it's not a it's a borrow, not a sale, but it's still word of mouth advertising.
I'll take it. Well, I'm flattered that you read it. I'm glad that you liked it, and I hope that you like Shadows of Justice.
Yeah, it sounds like a great book. Now, when you were talking about missing white women, the one that this person, this situation, she wasn't missing, but I'm sick of them bringing her up for the last 25 years,
Who?
and that's Jean Benet Ramsey.
But here's the thing about that story, is that it's so weird.
It is
Now,
weird,
when
but
I was working
she's
in
dead and
newsrooms,
she's been dead for 25 years.
well, but it's still okay. But we still talk about Jack the Ripper. If you follow true crime, any unsolved case that was a high-profile case is still fascinating. And this was so weird because most people in America didn't know about that baby beauty pageant scene. That's
Right,
just sick.
right. It's
We
really
saw that.
kind of it's
It's like
twisted.
you got 4 and 5 year old girls with lipstick, and they call them prostitutes. I mean, because that's so we didn't
Yeah,
know about that world. And then she gets killed on Christmas morning, and it's just so bizarre. And
it is
that's why
bizarre.
they bring it up. That's why
It
they
is
continue
bizarre.
to bring it up.
Yeah,
It,
but she fits, and this is another thing with the whole missing person thing with white females I've noticed. If they're blonde,
oh
it
yeah,
gets more attention.
yep, yep,
And that's the truth.
that's true,
I
absolute
look
truth.
at patterns and trends. I just noticed. That Gabby, she was blonde, or she
Yeah, no,
had the
she's
mixed
blonde.
blondish brown hair.
Yeah,
If they're blonde, it gets more.
we called it in newsrooms even then. We called it a pretty missing white girl syndrome. Was what the name is. What journalists were calling it. Now it's actually coming. I think it was Glenn Eichel actually who came up with that. For,
Oh, okay.
who coined that and I could be wrong and may be misattributing this, but yeah, pretty missing white girl syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
And they're almost it's exactly it. They're almost always blonde, and I'm not
Mm-hmm.
saying, and I got to be real careful here because I don't want to come off the wrong way with this. I'm not saying that it is unimportant when a young white woman goes missing. It is important when anyone goes missing. Is my point, and it's just bothersome. How can it not irk you to see there are only so many resources when it comes to the media, and when you've got one case that just sucking up all the air out of the room, and you got 280,000 cases that you had no clue, you had no idea. Like I was talking about, we were talking about Spotify and Pandora, and one of the reasons I like Spotify too is I listen to a lot of true crime podcasts, and
Oh,
there are so many serial killers who have targeted black girls and black women because they know that they're not going to get looked for. That's a
wow.
demographic where they're not going to put a lot of resources into try to figure out who did it. Not in general. And so these serial killers, they'll pick four or five, or that's who they'll pick up because they know they're least likely. As opposed to you attack some young blonde woman, it's going to be
It'll be on the evening
they're going to
news
find you.
immediately.
They're going to
Immediately.
find you.
Yeah, well, you're not disparaging, you're not saying that it's unimportant.
Okay.
You're saying there's a hierarchy,
Yes.
there's a pyramid.
A caste system. So.
Yeah, there is.
Mhm.
There is. To what stories get reported with the most energy and attention,
Mhm.
especially when it comes to violence, violent. Uh,
I mean, I can't name a case. Can you think of a case, a Gabby Petito, Lacey Peterson, JonBenet Ramsey case where the victim is African American? I mean,
the
I can't
only
think
one
of.
I can think of recently, and it's unfortunate, is the one where I forgot where it was, and it turned out to be a hoax. You know what I'm talking about? The girl says she saw a toddler on the side of the highway,
Oh yeah, 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 yeah,
and she
yeah.
got out of the car, and then she went somewhere, and it was like they were looking for her. And it's almost like what is uh it's bizarre that the one time they do put energy into it, it turns out to be a hoax.
Turns out to be a hoax. Which
The 100 times they didn't put energy into it, it was real. But then the one time
it's a
it's
hoax.
a hoax.
And the thing that's so sickening and frustrating about that is that it gives them a reason to be dismissive of these cases because that was
Yeah,
see, this is why we don't put energy into them. This is why.
yeah,
You know.
yes. Mm-hmm. It's true.
So
It's true. Well, we're at the end of our time, but what I am going to do is encourage people to get your book, not just to get this book. Do you have a copy of Outraged with you,
it's in
Candy?
the other room. It's in the other room. It's
Okay,
in,
well, Outraged has a red cover,
yes.
and although these aren't necessarily it's not necessarily a sequel.
No, it's the same characters, but it's
It's the
not.
same characters continue, so it's better to read the first book. And then you can immediately go to Shadows of Justice and read Shadows of Justice.
Well, what's cool is a lot of people are telling me that they picked this book up. A lot of people who got the advanced reader copies, and that they didn't know that this was part of a series, and so they read this and loved it, and they are going back to read Outrage, which is cool. So if you haven't read out, you don't have to have read Outrage to read this. I want to make sure
Right.
you understand
Yeah,
that.
yeah. But it's always good to sell two books.
Yes.
I have two fiction titles, and they're sequels, but it took me 5 years to write each of them. So the Genesis Files is the first part,
Yes.
and then Exodus from Treachery. See, it's a biblical tie-in. Exodus from Treachery is the second part. Well, they are standalones, but there's a main character who's a journalist. That's the common thread.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you get the
Yeah.
backstory in the Genesis files. But Exodus from Treachery, when people read that, they say, "Okay, I need to go back and read if they haven't read the Genesis
Okay, so
files."
what's the third one then with the biblical titles? You got a Deuteronomy
I
book?
have a title. No, Leviticus. I have a title.
Okay.
Leviticus Jones. I have a title. I just don't have a story yet. It's gonna be 5 more years.
I'm writing the next Topher Davis for next year, and it's well, I won't tell you. We don't have time. I'll tell you next time about
Do
it.
you have a title yet?
I do have a title, but if I tell you the title, I'll have to explain it. We don't have time.
Oh, okay. You can't. Okay.
Unless you tell
Well,
me we have time.
yeah, you have time to tell us the title.
Well, title, yeah, if you want me anything to. It's called The Burning of Russell City.
Oh, okay.
Burning of Russell City.
So it's kind of it's a different kind of title
It's a different
from the
kind of
other
title,
two.
but it's what it's really fast. What it's about was there was a community here in the East Bay that sprung up after the Second World War called Russell City, and it was unincorporated, and it's the only place they let African Americans and Latinos live. Um, but they The place was completely run down because of the fact that it had the county wouldn't give them infrastructure. They had no sidewalks, they had no running water, no indoor plumbing, electricity most places, no police department, no fire department. Whereas all around them were suburbs, but this place is the only place that Black people could live. And so what happened is that and I found out in research that this happened all across the country in the 50s and the 60s into the 70s, where they would a major city or county would let an area like a Russell City run down, and it's run down because you're not giving them what they need to be a sustainable place, and then they say it's blighted. They declare it blighted, meaning it's a slum, and then they take the property from the people
Yeah,
through
the
eminent
developers
domain,
come in.
sell it to white developers who
Mhm.
make millions and millions of dollars off it.
Yeah,
And
and
Russell
it's
City
gentrified after that.
is gentrified after that, and that's with Russell City. But Russell City, the people fought back, and so they burned them out. They
Oh,
burned, they burned them out. So what this story is, it's this Topher Davis story is he's got to go back and try to solve these fires because they never found out who did it. In real life, they never found out who the arsonist was. But he is going to go back to try to clear a man of murder who has been in prison since 1963 for killing his wife and baby and burning the house down. He's one of the people who was fighting back against them taking the city away through eminent domain. So that's what the title is. So
okay. So you actually found a real
oh yeah.
case, and then you're writing the story with Topher around it.
Well, no, the case itself. I mean, what's real about this is that Russell City existed. This is how the people were treated. These are the services they didn't have. This is how how the county stole their homes and land from them for pennies and sold it for millions. And this happened. It happened in Mill Valley by Chicago, where they did the same thing. Mill Valley was the same kind of community. They call it blighted. They pay a couple of $100, a couple $1,000 a home, take it, sell it to white developers. Chavez Ravine in Los Angeles was the same kind of an area, except that was Latino. And they do the same
Okay.
thing. They call it blighted. And it's a
Mm-hmm.
slum because you made it a slum. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
By
you
withdrawing any resources.
That's right, none
Mm-hmm.
exactly, and so
Mm-hmm.
that's what this book, that's what's in the background. It's just kind of a history lesson about because most people didn't know this stuff went on, and this is
Yeah.
another reason why we don't have Black generational wealth because it comes primarily from your parents have a house, they
Right.
pass on, and they leave it to you and your siblings. Well,
Right.
these people were given $2,000 for each house in Russell City, 2 grand, take it or leave it, and
Wow.
if those homes existed today in that area, they'd be worth over $1 million each. Easy, easy with the real estate market here.
Mm.
So there's no generational wealth. $2,000, take it or leave it.
Yeah, most people's, well, unless you're extremely wealthy, but your average person, your wealth is built in the equity of your home.
That's right.
And that's really what you have to pass on to
That's
your
exactly.
children.
Mhm.
Hopefully you've paid it off. You paid your mortgage and you own the home free and clear. And that's money that you can pass on. And
Mhm.
hopefully your children take care of the property because sometimes that doesn't happen.
Yeah. Well, a
That's a
lot
whole
of
nother
times
story.
it gets sold. It gets sold, and they start fighting over the money, and there's a lot.
Yes,
You know, good
all
problems to
kinds.
have. Good problems. Good problems to have. And nobody's ever
That's
left me
true.
squat. Nobody's ever died and left me anything. Nothing ever. So I told my kids they better not complain about what they get. They better not be fighting over it, because nobody ever left me anything.
Yeah. Well, um, this has been a great conversation about all kinds of things,
Yeah.
including your book. So, in
Thank
your
you.
books that you do, and you've had a very amazing career, just just starting as a stand-up comic and
Mhm.
then getting into journalism and TV and theater and all of
Oh, and I
that.
got my move. By the way, the three things that I said I wanted to do when I decided I wanted to write thrillers was the first was the one man show, and that was Not a Genuine Black Man. And because of the attention that Not a Genuine Black Man got, I got my first movie, which was The Bucket List. I played Morgan Freeman's youngest son in the Bucket List.
I haven't seen the bucket list. And now
Oh,
you're
you
gonna
gotta
make me go watch it.
you gotta see it. And people always talk about, well, that's on my bucket list. Well, that phrase did not exist before the movie. The screenwriter made that phrase up, and that's where it comes from.
Really?
Mhm.
As I use it, I have things on my bucket list. I
Everybody
have to
is
go.
because, well, the three things that I wrote down that I was going to do today would be called a bucket list, but that phrase did not exist. The
Exist before the movie.
screenwrter made it up.
So
Screenwriter
how big a role did you have? Like how?
uh, a lot bigger than the one that ended up on the screen. I mean, all the family scenes that there was a Morgan Freeman had two sons. His character has two sons and a daughter and a wife, and we had like three or four scenes. One, we were on the set of Jeopardy with Alex Trebek and all of this stuff. All got cut. All got cut. So you end up seeing me in like three or four scenes, and I got like fifth or sixth billing, in the movie. And then the second one, I've done three. The second one I did was a Marvel movie. It was Venom 2, the second one, Let There Be Carnage, with Woody Harrelson and Tom Hardy. And then I do have a bigger part. I play a reporter in it, but I have a bigger part in that one. And then Rob Reiner just put me in the sequel to This Is Spinal Tap, which will be out in the fall. And I went to New Orleans to shoot that. We shot that in New Orleans. I was thinking about that.
Oh,
You were saying that that's where you read Outraged.
yes, it was
I loved
already.
it. I loved
Wow.
it.
Okay. Well, congratulations on this. It's good to do the things that you wanted to do.
Yeah, yeah.
The things that you set out, you have a list of things that you want to get done.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, a lot of people don't start working on them. They just kind of have the list and they don't pursue it. They don't execute. You have to execute. You have to actually intentionally get started with
And
it.
you have to know where it is that you want to go. You have to have
Yes,
what
it needs
Napoleon
to
Hill
be
called
somewhat specific.
a definite major purpose is what Napoleon Hill called it. You know exactly this is what I want to do. So now I got to find three new things.
Well, or you just keep writing these sequels.
Well, that's gonna happen. As long as you guys buy them, I'll write them.
Okay. Well, Brian, it was great. Great. You've been a great guest. Thank you for
Thank
being
you.
willing to extend the time
Oh, my pleasure.
and got to know a lot more about you. The audience has. And so that's really probably me too. They didn't know some of the stuff. I never mentioned a couple of the things that I mentioned. I've never mentioned before out loud. I don't know if the part about the us being in a Jewish neighborhood.
Uh-huh.
Some things you don't think about for like it's been years since you thought about something that happened in the past. I hadn't
Mhm.
thought about that for
By
a
the
long
way,
time.
that's a book. That excited
Well,
is a book.
okay, all
I'm
right,
serious. There's a story there somewhere. There's a story there. I
okay,
think my personal opinion based on the stuff that I read. I think that's a book.
okay. Well, I don't know if I have enough information to fill a whole book.
Just put me in the acknowledgments, okay? Just say Brian Copeland told me to do. Just put me in the
It
acknowledgments.
could be it could be a children's book.
It could,
That's a short story.
yeah, it could. It depends on what you do with it.
Yeah, and
Because
I have children's books. Most of my book I have six children's books. So I have two novels. I have six children's books,
oh wow,
and the rest are nonfiction. So I have a combination of
well,
books.
I want to check out your children's books. How old? What age range?
5 to 10 in there. And one's a series called Kids Biz. It teaches children how to be entrepreneurs.
Oh, that's
And
great.
that's a 5 book series. And then I have one book called Boss Women. It's for children. It's actually it's biographies of 7 African American women who built their businesses from the ground up. But it's in rhyme form, it's in poetry form.
I've
And
got
it
a 3-year-old granddaughter. Who we buy a lot of books like that for, and she loves
okay,
reading. And so
okay,
I'm gonna look up your series because it's right.
okay.
There's
Well,
so many great children's books that are being written right now
there are.
especially for African American girls. I'm shocked by how many books we've been able to find that are by and about African American girls. So it's because there wasn't, that wasn't when you and I were kids. We couldn't find that stuff anywhere.
No, we didn't. But I was an avid reader, but I just read everything. You know,
Yeah.
I, you know, and I didn't really start getting into Black books until I was like middle school. And, I was reading adult books then. Um, Interesting stuff. Iceberg Slim and stuff like that. So anyway, um, have a great night, Brian.
All right, Chichi, thanks for having me. I'll hopefully I'll see you next year if I get this.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll
Well,
see this book
yeah,
finished.
once I find out your release date, I'll be in touch with Entice.
Okay. I want if I can mention too, if anybody wants just more information on all the stuff that I've done, or performance live performances I got coming up, or I've got a couple other books that are based on some of my other one man plays. Just go to briancopeland.com and it's all there.
Oh,
It's
okay.
and write ups and TV clips and all that stuff. It's all there. briancopeland.com.
Okay, so you got your name.
I got
Um,
mine early
Not
on.
everybody can. I
Now that
got mine too, though.
I got mine in 2002. I got mine.
Okay, yeah,
2002.
I've had mine a long time. So yeah, it's important to have your name.com. So anyway, thanks so much. I am going to get the book and I will send you a review and a note. I will let you know
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I
about
appreciate it.
how much I enjoy it.
Okay. And if you don't like it, don't write
No,
me.
no, I won't.
I don't hear from
I,
you if you don't like
yeah,
it.
I won't because I don't. That's what I said. If I don't, I keep it to myself. So
You don't have anything good to say.
right, I don't post negative reviews
Okay.
unless a book is like overhyped to the point where I can't believe they hyped this book and
Oh,
I bought it and I read it and it was terrible. That's then I'll leave a negative review.
that's
But
contagious too high. That's
other,
contagious too high. Yeah.
it happens. Okay, well, again, thanks for being on the show and congratulations.
Thank you very much. Take
Okay,
care.
good night.
Good night.